So welcome back to my channel. This is Dom, and Warlords very kindly sent me the new supplement for Hail Caesar. This is the War of the Roses supplement, written by Rob Grayston. And I thought, rather than doing a review, because Martin, Seventh Son, has done an outstanding review about this book, and he knows more about the period than I will ever know, certainly in terms of the history, I thought I'd do a little different video than the ones I normally do, just looking at the sort of 5 things that I think you're either going to love or you're going to hate about this book. So let's have a look. So yes, Warlords very kindly sent me this new supplement, and I have to say, it's a really nice book, much like all the other supplements that Warlords produces these days. Very high quality, very nice paper stock, good imagery, lots of lovely pictures that largely, in fact almost exclusively, look like they're Perry figures. Covers the history of the book, blah blah blah, lots of really good stuff. I'm not going to get into that because, as I say, Martin did a really good review of it, and you can check that out. But basically what this book replaces is this section in the Hail Caesar 2 book, which is later medieval adaptations, which is a fairly minimal kind of addition to the main rules. Just gives a little bit more flavour, and crucially for this, the army lists. So that is now replaced if you're playing the much later medieval period War of the Roses and some of the associated wars around that period. And it, as I say, really nice. But there's a couple of things that really caught my eye in here, which I think we're gonna need to see how they play out. And you know, it's always the case with any rule set that you can, if you don't like them, don't play them. Don't play the rule set entirely, or stick to the rules you're using, or drop out the section that you don't like. That's the other thing. So this comes with a big caveat. So kind of 5 things that caught my eye though. So the first one for me that really jumped out was Arrowstorm. Now, when I first read this, I didn't think it was that big a deal. So basically, it talks about how every unit of archers or household troops with archers can fire a maximum of 3 volleys. Okay, that's a bit tough. So basically, once you've finished shooting, you're out of ammo. That seems quite tough. And it does therefore mean you have to choose whether or not you're going to save your fire until the last minute or not. In association, there's a point blank rule, which means whenever you fire at point blank range with longbow, they cap the saving throw for the target of 5, which is pretty good when you're shooting at heavily armoured men at arms, for instance. But what I hadn't appreciated, if you then go into the army lists, archers have a long range value of 6. Now in the main rule book and the rules that I've been using up to now, they only get 3. So that basically means an archery unit fires with 6 dice, and it's the same if they're household troops, so bill and bow, combined troops. 6 dice. Now, okay, they only fire 3 times unless you have a mechanic in the game to reload. In some way, you know, have a supply wagon or something that feeds new arrows out. But 6 shots is quite devastating, or potentially quite devastating, bearing in mind that in Hail Caesar, any 6 on shooting instantly creates a break test for the target unit. 6 shots also, if you hit with all 6, will instantly shake most standard size units. And a small size unit typically will have 4 stamina, so that means they're going to be very easily shaken by just 1 volley of arrows. So I have to see how that plays out. I see where the author's coming with this. There are occasions where arrow storms were devastating. I kind of wonder whether it's a rule that should only be played in certain scenarios, but I'd say until we play it out on the tabletop, it's going to be very difficult to know. So that was the first thing that I saw that caught my eye immediately. The second thing in this supplement that I think some people are going to either love or hate, or maybe even a combination of the two, is the leaders. So much like the recent Arthur supplement that Warlords bought out, there's a focus on the characters or the leaders of your groups, of your battalion, joining a unit and adding their effects, and therefore the risk that impacts their joining a unit. So you've got William Neville here. He has a leadership of 9, so that's fairly standard, a fighting value of 2, and a points value of 40. He also gives you Knights of Great Revenge. So the fact he's very experienced, any unit he joins gains the Brave and Drilled special rules. So I think this is kind of nice adaptation, and I don't think it's going to upset people. And there's quite a lot of characters from the period. So there's Henry Holland. You've got a number of Edward IV, lots of different lords and nobles. And if there weren't enough, there's a whole section on livery and how to create your own leader. Now, when I first saw all this section, so medieval heraldry is incredibly complicated. I don't pretend to understand it at all. Many people have spent a lot of time studying this. So having a nice simple breakdown of how it works, I think is a good thing. Now, whether we needed this in a supplement, I don't know, but it's part of this. But within it is the opportunity to create your own livery and your own badge type. So you could create a fantasy lord. Now, again, this sort of crossover, and the rules definitely have this within, or this supplement definitely has this within it. A lot of focus around kind of almost sort of a narrative type game, a fantasy type game, a sort of RPG type game, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. And as I say, you don't have to use it, so it's entirely up to you. But I find this very interesting. When I first saw this, I thought, I don't know, I like this. Because creating, there's a myriad of lords and ladies, for that matter, that took part in the War of the Roses. And so if your lord isn't covered here in this book, why do you need to have a randomly created one? You just do a little bit of research and find another one that you can adapt. Now, having thought about it and also talking to Martin about this, I think this is probably not a bad thing because, for instance, there's a lot of minor nobles that we don't really know an awful lot about for the period. So if you were deciding that you knew a particular lord, or you just, I don't know, there was nothing researched in it. For instance, I was doing a battle where I wanted to use a Scottish division for the War of the Roses, and there's very little evidence apparently that exactly what Scottish lords accompanied, if any, the army south from Scotland and in the campaigns with Margaret of Anjou. And having this, I could have just randomly created one. So I guess that's sort of interesting in its own right and to be applauded. Also, there is the ability to create your own characteristics for them. So if you wanted to randomly generate a character with a special trait, you can do so. And I guess, that's good in a way. Let's say some people will love it, some people will hate it. So here it is, you can create your own trait for your own commander and point it up accordingly. So, yeah, I think that's kind of good. If you really didn't want to pick it or there's no stats available, you can create your own. That's a good thing. And I can't see anybody being terribly upset by that. So the next thing that I think is going to catch a few people by surprise is how the author has chosen to treat the different units. So in some rule sets, you have men-at-arms, you have billmen, you have cavalry, you have archers, all sort of in separate, distinct units. Now, I like what he's done in terms of calling them household troops, which are a combination of billmen and bowmen. And that reflects very much how I've been playing with them using the rules that I do. So this is, for me, a standard household unit, has a group of billmen in the middle and 2 lots of bowmen on each side. And that's very much how he's chosen to do it. Now, bear in mind, of course, the bowmen have only got the 3 shots. So you would fire that, you have the stats here for this. It has a clash of 7, a sustained of 7, which is pretty pokey, a short range of 3, which so for support value, and a long range of 6, and a saving roll of 4+, stamina of 6. So, you know, that's pretty hardcore, and that's one of your standard units. Now, you don't, in these rules, have separate units for men-at-arms, for instance, but what you can do is upgrade. So there's an option to upgrade your household troop and turn that into a men-at-arms unit instead. So you have a mixture of men-at-arms and bowmen, and that makes them steady and stubborn, which is pretty chunky. Now, you could still leave your bill and bow behind if you wanted to, but I think for neatness, that's how I'm going to choose to represent it. Now, it does mean that it's very difficult to have, well, it means that that isn't a pure men-at-arms unit. But under the rules, you can have, under the army list, you can have a separate bill unit and then upgrade that to men-at-arms. So I could pay the points, decide that I want to have a bill unit, upgrade that to men-at-arms, and Bob's your auntie, there's my men-at-arms unit. Simples. And I think that works pretty well. And of course there is an option to making it a small unit, which will be for me just 2 bases. I think that all works pretty well, but I think it will surprise some people, that combined effects unit. I'm not sure everybody plays like that, but I do think that that reflects very much how, to my reading, how the Wars of the Roses and that later medieval period played out. Archers were not afraid to get stuck in. They wouldn't just fire their volleys, run out of arrows, and then just wait there for the battle to finish. They would get stuck in, and the lure of loot and ransom, if appropriate, was high, and they wouldn't get stuck in very quickly. So I think that's a good thing. So the full thing that I think some people are going to love, and some people less so, in this supplement, is the whole setup for playing a random battle. And again, caveat to this, you do not have to use this. This is entirely your choice. Nobody forces you to. But there's a whole section on terrain, which allows you to randomly generate terrain, which I quite like. So you basically split the table into if it's a 6x4 table, into 6 sections and roll for what the predominant terrain is, which I like. There's also a section on weather. Now, you know, you're going to love weather if it's a good thing for you, but you're going to hate it if it means none of your cannons can fire, for instance. But the fact is that a lot of War of the Roses battles were impacted considerably by weather conditions. So I kind of like this. So you've got the mud, you've got fog, you've got rain, you've got drizzle, you've got frozen, and wonder, which is basically a shooting star, which has a positive, a bit fantasy, but it is what it is. Reality is, people of this period were quite taken by things like that. Now, it's not a great chance. At the beginning of the game, one player rolls a d6. On a roll of 1 to 5, there's no effect. On a roll of 6, you roll again on the weather table. So, you know, it is what it is. I think those are great. I also think the reconnaissance section is very good. So this basically decides who gets what choice of what side of the table and who deploys first, based on how many light troops you have, how many light horse you have within your army, and kind of that works. I mean, I've seen that sort of system work in other rule sets. I think it's a good one. Gives you a way of determining and a reason for taking your prickers and your light cavalry to accompany the army. Muster. Now, this is one I can think of a couple of people I play with regularly. They're going to get quite upset by this one. Again, you don't have to use it. So these are, as it says, these are optional elements. You can choose either both of the following elements, or use, or don't use them in your battles. It's up to you. So the idea behind muster is that you build your army, but you don't know that it's actually all going to turn up. Now, there were desertions, there were illnesses, people were off raiding, all sorts of things went on. And so what happens with this is you roll a d6 for each of your battles before the game starts. And if you roll a 1, you get a bad omen. If you roll a 6, you get a good omen. Now, the bad omen can be anything from losing 70 points of your troops out of that battalion, which is pretty substantial, or 2 of the units in that division become freshly raised. Good things, you could end up with a whole load of extra cavalry. You could get some extra infantry, an extra unit of archers or something like that within, some more mercenaries. So you can see where I'm going with this. So yeah, I think, again, you don't have to use it. For a fun game, I think that could add some flavour. Talking of flavour, there's also various other things you can bring into it. They're calling favours. Again, you will dice on this chart. There's various conditions to it, but all sorts of good things and bad things that come out of it. So if you've got this one, Rested, a good one. One division chosen by you gains the Tough Fighter special rule for the first round of combat in the battle. Or the bad one, not so well rested. One of the divisions is a -1 stamina for its units chosen by your opponent. There's other things, miracles, various other things that can have an effect. So again, I think this is interesting. It's very much of the more on the fantasy side of things, but not so much that it doesn't base itself in reality. So I kind of like it, and I can see myself playing that out. We'll see what other people think. So the fifth thing, well, first of all, before I do the fifth thing, this book is packed full of scenarios, historical refights. Pretty much, again, I'm no expert on the War of the Roses. I know a reasonable amount, but it seems to cover pretty much every battle of any significance that took part in the Wars of the Roses. So that's great. So if you want to refight Towton, there it is, with all the different deployments and what have you. But the one that particularly interested me is right at the back. There's a whole section on campaign and campaign rules. Now, I think this will excite a lot of players. Campaigns are one of those things that are an interesting balance between playability, speed, and ease of producing, ease of use, I guess, is the simple way. And he's used a nodal approach, a bit like I've seen many times. I know Martin did something similar with one of his campaigns. It's a fairly common kind of way of operating. There's rules around how you start, what armies you start with, how you recruit more troops, events that happen, garrisoning certain areas, etc., and then how you fight out the battles, and of course how you deal with sieges, which are a crucial part of this. Wheeling and dealing, so you can have a bit of treachery and what have you within this as well, which, you know, I think is, again, adds a lot of flavour. This period was renowned for treachery, you know, that is all built into these campaigns. Plus, you've got scenarios or campaigns based around particular periods. So the war that wasn't. This is assuming that Richard III heads south rather than, as he does, meeting his fate at Bosworth. You've got other options here. You've got the war in the north you can do, which I quite like as well. The fact this book covers a slightly wider period than traditional War of the Roses. So yeah, there you go. That was my my look at some of the things I think people are going to love or hate. I think on the whole it's a very positive supplement, and I'm going to enjoy playing it. So subscribe, like, do all that good stuff. And let me know in the comments what struck you from what you've seen of the rules so far, what you excited about, slightly nervous about, etc. And hit that subscribe and follow, and you'll see some battle reports in due course. Thanks for watching. This is Dom, signing out.